What is the process of poetic creation? In the preface, Wordsworth also gives a detailed account of the process of poetic creation. His account of poetic creation has to be pieced together from several passages in the preface, and each part of it needs to be read in its context. Thus, the memorable and misleading statement that all good poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings should not be taken to literally. Nothing could be further from Wordsworth's mind than to equate poetry with a rapid gush of emotion. The statement occurs twice each time in a context which describes intense mental as well as emotional activity. For Wordsworth, the process characteristically begins in a state of calm with the remembering of some past emotional experience. Excitement gradually increases until the poet is almost reliving the experience, yet with a difference. The present emotion is kinder too, not identical with that of the past. The difference is that the emotion has now been modified by thought and related to many past thoughts and feelings. The germinal experience has in fact been or is in the process of being understood and evaluated, and it is only by this means that the ensuing poem acquires its worthy purpose. Thought and emotion, conscious and unconscious elements continue their intimate interaction until the spontaneous overflow begins, that is, until these elements are ready to combine in a poem and begin the work of shaping it. As Derek Roper points out, spontaneous seems to imply both that shaping process cannot be begun at will and that once begun it is to some extent self-directing. This does not mean that the poet's active intelligence has to be switched off, like the more passive and intuitive faculties. It plays its part in the selection and composing, and one of the pleasure experience by the poet at work is the sense of difficulty overcome. Finally, the poem is complete, and if all has gone well, it will achieve the complex end which the poet proposes to himself. This account could not be expected to apply to the writing of all poetry, nor even to all of Wordsworth's poetry, but as a description of the process behind the intensely felt, deeply meditated writing found in Tinton Abbey and in much of Wordsworth's other work of this period. It is completely convincing and shows something of the same searching self awareness as the poem themselves. What are the manifold themes of the preface? Preface is a rich piece of writing, its themes are manifold, and it raises many questions. To quote Margaret Rebel, it is quite impossible to try to give an account of all the questions raised by the preface. For in it, Wordsworth covers an enormous stretch of ground, throwing out quite effortlessly the most acute observations on the relationship of poetry and science, on the use of meter, on the place of pleasure in art, on Aristotle, on taste and its cultivation, and on the history of poetry. It raises, in fact, almost every knotty aesthetic problem one can think of and deals with it with an amazing confidence and energy. After reading it, one is quite convinced that Wordsworth at least had thought long and deeply, and that, as he says at the outset, indolence is the last thing he could possibly be accused of. It is a pleasure to read someone who is so sure of his own mind and who at the same time has nothing dry or opinionated about him. The preface leaves a final impression of a quite extraordinary combination of creative and critical power, of passion and thought. It cannot be read too often. Every time it seems to contain something new and unexpected. It marks the beginning of a new age. Coleridge on the shortcomings of the preface. There is no doubt that the preface has its faults. Coleridge criticized it for the needless obscurity of its later half, and the extreme elaboration and constrainedness of its diction. As Geralt tells us, the preface is a propaganda pamphlet and as such suffers from the sin of exaggeration and overemphasis. Wordsworth frankly goes to extremes. Derek Roper rightly points out that considered as the introduction to a collection of poems, the preface is not a tactful piece of writing. 40 pages of non-theology prose seems as likely to have deterred readers at the outset as Coleridge's Ancient Mariner, which Wordsworth had just removed from the beginning to the end of the volume. Those who preserved ran some risk of being alienated either by the extreme form in which Wordsworth states some of his doctrines or by his failure of tone, which is sometimes pedantic, sometimes arrogant, and sometimes absurdly defensive. Wordsworth makes bold claims for his poems, such as not all of them will bear, declares that to appropriate them drastic revolutions of earlier poetry will be necessary, and cautions the reader interminably as to how they must and must not be read.